Good afternoon and welcome to the third Writing Center workshop of the quarter. My name is Tom Stearns. I'm the director of the Writing Center at Grace Harbor College, and today we're going to be talking about MLA formatting. We're going to talk about how to format the document, how to format in-text citations, as well as Works Cited pages at the end of the document. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to our Writing Center tutor, Amanda Wells, who is going to talk to you about how to format the first page of your MLA papers. Amanda, take it away.
Hey everybody, I'm just here to start out with how a paper gets formatted in MLA, and it's pretty simple. I'm going to share my screen with you so you guys can see what I'm talking about and what it looks like. So here's my PowerPoint right here on MLA formatting. The first page is pretty, well, it's merely a header title, but this is the basic format of what it looks like. You have your header up here, you have your information about you, what you're working on, and you have your title. And what we need to start a paper is simply to put the information in three different spots. We use information, we use student name, instructor name, class name, and the due date. And the title, and then for the header, we use the student name and the page number. And as far as where it goes pretty easy. The header goes over to the right, and then all the rest of the information is to the left with a centered title. In order to place a header, you want to first go to Insert. You'll find it in your Word document here, right down here in this red circled place, and you click on that. And once you click that, then it comes up with a page number. And you click on the page number, and then you're going to want to choose plain number 3. In MLA formatting, we don't typically use any kind of fancy symbols or lines or anything. We just leave it at a 1 there. Once you've picked plain number 3, it's automatically going to come up on your paper. And then you're going to want to type in your last name before the number. After that, you can close the header and you're all done. Over on the left side of the paper is where you're going to put all the information that your instructor is going to need to know, just so he knows what, or she knows what the paper is about. You're going to want your full name, so in this case, Jane, student, your first name first, and your teacher's name will go on the next line. Again, it's going to be first name and then the second name, unless they prefer to be called professor, whomever, or doctor, whomever, again, last name. On the third line, you're going to want your class, the name of your class. In this case, it's English 101. And it's optional if you want to add a description of what the draft is that you're talking about. In this case, it's an analysis essay, rough draft. After that, you want the due date of the assignment, not the date that you're working with currently, but the date the assignment is actually due to be turned in. Once you finish the date, you just have to add your title. You go to the next line and you center your title, and then you're ready to start your paper. And that's pretty much, also a few points. Remember, you're going to want your font size to be 12 point. And your entire paper needs to be double spaced. The double spacing is really important because when it's double spaced, people can add comments on it if they need to. It can be graded. You can go through peer review with it easier, and it's a whole lot easier to read. One of the first things you're going to need to do is click on this button right here. This button will open up this box, as you can see, and you're going to want to pick the 2.0 space. And you're also going to want to click remove space after paragraph. Otherwise, because if you don't do that, you'll have all kinds of really weird spacing issues in your paper. And whenever you are writing anything like titles or names or any of that, don't use any bold font. So in the end, your product should look like this. It's really not too hard. So I guess if there's any other questions, just give us a holler in the Writing Center. I'm going to hand you back over to Tom, though, because he's got some more things about the formatting of your Works Cited, and so I'm going to hand you over to Tom.
All right. Thanks so much, Amanda. That was fantastic. All right. And yeah, I will second what you said. So if you have questions about your MLA formatting or anything like that, or want some help using Microsoft Word, that's a great reason to hop on into the Writing Center. Visit us during our open hours. We're open on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. We're happy to sit down with you and talk about how to get that formatting correct. So, all right, so my turn. Let's talk about in-text citations and Works Cited. So there are two types of citations in any paper that you're working on. And the first one is called Works Cited. So the Works Cited list appears at the end of the document, and it provides all the need-to-know information about the sources, or about the sources. So, for example, here's an example where we had the Ballad of Spring Hill. This appeared in a book called Disaster Songs in Canada that was published in 2012. Oops, I lied. It's not in a book. It's actually on a website, and you can access it right here. It looks like this particular song didn't have an author. Maybe it was anonymous. But notice that all these other entries here, they all do have authors. So notice in this next one, this looks like it's a book published by the National Academy of Sciences and the National Research Council, and it's written by Horace D. Beach and Rex A. Lucas, and it's titled Individual and Group Behavior in a Coal Mine Disaster. So there's a lot of information for any of your sources, and your readers are going to want to be able to access those sources if they have more questions, if they want to double check your work, etc. So for that reason, you want to have a Works Cited list at the end of your paper. You don't want to necessarily put all that information in the body of your paper. If I tried to put all of this information in the body of my paper when I mention this book, it's going to get too messy. It's going to distract from my paper, right? And that's why it appears at the end of your paper. But in your paper, you do need to mention, where this information is coming from when you are referring to information. So notice here are some examples of in-text citations. Take a look at this one. Buildings shook, telephones went dead, and 73 miles away, seismographs at Dalhousie University registered the movement as a small earthquake. Learner 24. So that Learner 24 there is an in-text citation. So in the text, you want to provide a citation. You want to refer your reader to what source that information is coming from. But you don't want to put all this information. Horace D. Beach and Rex A. Lucas, individual and group behavior in a coal mine disaster nationally. If we did that, this parentheses would go on for like 2 lines. That would be way too cluttered. So we're just going to provide a little bit of information in the text and a lot of information at the end, kind of like an appendix. So let's work through how to formulate each of these things. So I recommend starting with your Works Cited list. So whenever you have a source that you're going to use for your document or for your assignment that you're working on, document it right away. Put together that Works Cited entry, so that way when you go to create your in-text citations as you're writing your essay, you know exactly how to formulate it correctly based on what the Works Cited entry looks like. So each source in your Works Cited list is called an entry. So right here you can see 4.5 entries displayed here. Entries appear in alphabetical order. So notice that this one, we disregard the word the here. That doesn't count towards alphabetizing. But we start with BA, and then BE, and then BR, and then BU, etc. So alphabetize your list according to the first word that appears in the entry. Another thing to notice is that entries are not enumerated. What that means is I don't have number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, anything like that for a works cited list. There are some citation methods where you'll have a number 1 and you put a number 1 next to the first thing that you refer to and put a number 2 next to the second thing that you refer to, etc. There are some citation systems like that, but MLA is not one of those systems, so don't put any numbers for your entries. You'll use what's called a hanging indent. Notice that on each of these 4 lines, the first line is flush left and the second line is indented a ½ inch. If one of these went on for 3 lines, that third line would also be indented ½ inch. The reason we use hanging indents is if you imagine this was printed out and on a sheet of paper and you wanted to find the reference that you were looking for, you could just take your index finger and drag it down the list and you could just be looking at the first word of each title, so you could find it in alphabetical order very easily. That's the reason for hanging indents. You'll begin at the top of a fresh page. So you wouldn't want to have works cited in the middle of page 3. Maybe your paper finishes on page 3, then you should do what's called a page break and start at the top of page 4, works cited, and then your list. Those words works cited should be centered at the top of the page. And if you only have one entry, like there's only one reference that you're using for your paper, then you should call that work cited, singular. So I'll give you some basic rundown of what information needs to be provided in the works cited list. And if you want more detailed guidelines, check out the MLA handbook or the Purdue OWL. So each entry contains the following info. You start with the author's name. So notice here, Horace D. Beach and Rex A. Lucas, Roger David Brown, Arnold Burden and Andrew Safer. If an article or if a source has no author, then you just skip the author portion and the first thing you put is the title, like you see with the Ballad of Spring Hill. The second thing after the author's name is going to be the title of the source, whether that's the chapter, the article, the web page, etc. Then you'll put what MLA calls the title of the container, if applicable. So it may be a book, an album, newspaper, website, etc. So for example, on this website, the Disaster Songs in Canada website, which you can visit at disastersongs.ca, they have many different web pages, and one of the web pages on that website is called the Ballad of Spring Hill. So you would put that, the web page first, and then you would put the website second. After that, you'd put any other contributors. If there was, for example, a translator or an editor for the work, then you would put that information, if applicable. Version, volume, or issue numbers, if applicable. Notice that none of these sources have those, but you might have, if you're working with journal entries, academic journals, then you'll have version, volume, and issue numbers sometimes. Publication date will come next. So notice you can see here 2012, 1960, 1990. That's occurring towards the end of the works cited entry. And if there's a URL, you can provide the URL as well. For example, disastersongs.ca/the Ballad of Spring Hill. Notice that they remove the HTTPS and they remove the www. It's just assumed that that's the start. So this cuts down on space that you take up. All right, so that's your works cited list, the basics for that. Now let's talk about in-text citations. So what do we need to do for the in-text citations? So again, here's an example of what it looks like in the paper over here on the left. And now here on the right is what it looks like in the works cited list. So you include the author names in your in-text citation. So for example, Burden and Safer, 133. So Burden, Arnold, and Andrew Safer. So you include the author names so that the reader can locate that entry in the works cited list. For this source, I do not want to put the dramatic life of a country doctor in my parentheses. That would be a bad move, because then my reader is going to go, take their finger and look down this list of the hanging indents, and they're going to be looking for dramatic life, but they're not going to find it. They're only going to find Beach, Brown, Burden, and Burney. they would have to go over into the middle, which is more difficult to read through quickly to find something that says the dramatic life. So we wouldn't want to include that in the parentheses. Now remember we had that example earlier where there was no author available. If that's the case, if you have an anonymous source or a source that doesn't have an author, but two considerations. One, is that a reputable source? If it doesn't have an author's name attached to it, if nobody's standing up and saying, yes, I wrote this and I am an expert and I can attest that this is true, is there a better source of that information out there? But sometimes you need to use an anonymous source. Like, for example, if you're quoting a song that was written anonymously or something like that. So if there is no author available, you'll put the first word or words that appear in the entry, usually the title, into the parentheses. That's the only time that you would see a title in the parentheses. So just think, in the parentheses, you need the name of the author. So it tells us who the author is, so we can find it in our Works Cited list. But then what's this 24, or this 133, or the 244? What's that extra information there? Well, that indicates where to find that in the source itself. So for most sources, this is going to be a page number. Like if it's for a book or a journal article, then you would be pointing the reader to which page in the book they'll find that information on. If you're citing poetry, so if you're doing like an analysis of a poem or something like that, then you wouldn't put the page number, you would put the line number. So when you're doing in-text citations, you should cite your source regardless of whether you're paraphrasing or quoting directly. Doesn't matter. Whether you're doing one or the other, you should always cite your source. So take a look at this first one. It's underlined in green. This is an example of paraphrasing. Prince Philip made a highly publicized visit to Spring Hill, where he visited the recuperating miners in the hospital. Learner, 162. So that information, the student didn't discover that information independently of any resources. The student didn't do an investigative report back in the 60s and discover what Prince Philip did, right? The student read that in a book by Lerner. And so the student paraphrased that information and put it into their own words, which you see in green. And then at the end of that, they attributed their source. So that way, they're basically telling the reader, hey reader, if you want to know more about Prince Philip's visit to Springfield, check out the Lerner book that I refer to in my Works Cited list, and check out page 162, and you'll find all the information you need about that. Let's take a look at a quoted example. Shortly after the first group of trapped miners was rescued, The Ed Sullivan Show, America's most popular network program, invited the miners and their wives to appear on air to, quote, commemorate the heroism of the individual, end quote, Burden and Safer, 169. So you can see in this example, the student who wrote this paper, they're paraphrasing most of the information in this sentence. All of the first half of this sentence is all paraphrased information that they found in Burden and Safer. But then they wanted to throw in a quote because they thought the words here, which I haven't looked into this, but my guess is maybe this is what Ed Sullivan said about these people. They wanted to quote that directly because it has a certain kind of panache or some gusto to it. So commemorate the heroism of the individual is a quote there. Notice that after they finish the quote, they open the parentheses and then say, if you want to know more about this quote or this information I paraphrased here, take a look at the Burden and Safer article in my Works Cited list and turn to page 169 and you'll find more information. So one thing to take note of when you are quoting, and this is important, notice we've got the quotes and there's no period inside the quotes. So even if there was a period here in the original, you take it out when you're citing it in your text and you put the period there at the end of the sentence. So that's, you can see appearing right here. I think one way to remember this, one way that's easy for me to remember this is this parentheses, the Burden and Safer 169 right here, that's really part of this sentence, right? It's telling the reader that this information came from Burden and Safer. If I put the period here, if I put the period after individual, then my readers might be confused and they might think that burden and safer is talking about the next sentence when it's actually talking about the previous sentence. So just think that period separates out ideas. So we'll put it after the parentheses, not before, and not inside the quotes. Now, if you have a longer quote that maybe has a period inside of it, but not at the end, don't change that period, keep that period. All right. For narrative in-text citations, that's where you mention the author directly in your sentence. Then you include only the page number in parentheses. So take a look at this one. It was not just the rescuers who were portrayed as heroic. Miners themselves and their friends and relatives received the same praise. Lerner described miners in romanticized terms as, quote, the strange, hardened men who looked death in the eye every working day, end quote. 2. So in this sentence, normally after a quote, you should put the author's name and the page number, right? But in this case, there was no need to put the name Lerner here in the parentheses because it's already clear from the context of the sentence that this quote comes from Lerner. If I had mentioned Lerner in a previous sentence or a couple sentences back, I would need to make it really clear to my reader that Lerner is the source of this quote, whether by saying she or he describe miners in romanticized terms or by putting their name in the parentheses here. A few more things to know about in-text citations. 1, they only apply to one sentence. So if notice that each one of these sentences that's coming from different sources, each one of them has their own parentheses. Now, in this example, it says, within minutes, a crowd of anxious town people had formed at the pit of Spring Hill's No. 2 mine, the deepest working mine in North America, burden safer. So this sentence is applying just to, this citation is applying just to this sentence. Again, like I said earlier, don't mention titles, only mention authors. Unless there's no authors or multiple sources by the same author, these are kind of rare situations. Check out the guidebook, the Purdue OWL, or just check out the Writing Center and we'll help you figure that out. Don't include dates, don't include URLs. That's kind of the grossest thing I think I've seen in an in-text citation is when there's a URL that is so long and it takes like 2 lines to finish. And so it just kind of messes up, it junks up the whole paragraph, so to speak. So don't include URLs in your in-text citations. Remember, the works cited at the end of the paper, that's the right place to put the URLs. Do not include paragraph numbers for web pages. Now this is a little bit different in other citation styles like APA, and in previous editions of MLA, you would include paragraph numbers. If that's something you're used to, don't do that. Don't worry about that. And do not use superscript, which looks like this. If you have a little number at the end of a sentence, you may see this. For example, you've probably seen websites where they use a 1 or a 2 or a 3 after each one of their sources. If you've taken a history class or a philosophy class, you may have used Chicago style, in which case you would use those superscript numbers. We don't do that in MLA ever. Basically, you use them for something called footnotes, which you won't use for any of your papers in college for MLA. So you don't have to worry about that. So no superscript, just use names and page numbers. All right, so that's all I've got for you about in-text citations and works cited lists. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda, and Amanda is going to walk us through how to, in Microsoft Word, how to write those first 6 lines and get the start of your paper going. So Amanda, I'll turn it back over to you.
All righty, well, then here we go. We're going to first go and we'll call up a Word document here, and it's just going to be a blank paper at the moment. But our first thing is to start with a header. You want to go over here to insert, and then you want to insert header. There we go. And you want to go to page number, actually. And top of page, and you're playing number 3. As you can see here, we have the one, it's already started, that's already telling the the piece of paper you're working with, that is page number 1. And you're going to insert your last name. In this case, like with the example of earlier, I'm just going to use student as the last name.
That's a good last name.
And then you're going to want to close your header, and you are done. That number is actually going to keep on changing. I'll give you a new piece of paper down here. You'll see that number is going to change now to a 2, meaning you're on the second page of the paper. But anyway, get back up to the top of the paper here. So in here, you're going to want to insert your name. So, student, your teacher's name. I don't remember what name I used earlier, but anyway. So Henry Teacher Works.
Yep.
English 101, or whatever your assignment actually is. It doesn't have to be English 101. It can be anything. It doesn't matter. It can be Chemistry 101 if they're requiring paper in an MLA. And then in this case, just so you can see how it works, I'm going to also put in the assignment. It's in this case, we'll call it an analysis paper. Sorry. Analysis essay. Sorry, I'm hitting the wrong keys, but anyway.
That's okay.
And then your date, the due date of when it's due. So we're going to say this paper is due 10/9/20. After that, you're going to want the title of your paper, and you're just going to go down one more, but then you're going to go over here to these boxes here. And this one here, the second one, will center your title. And then you're just going to put the title of the paper. Capitalizing all the main words of your title. After that, whenever you hit enter again, it's going to go back to the center, and you're going to want to move your cursor back over there so you can start your paper. And then you're all set to go. You can indent and then start typing away whatever your paper is going to be. But before you actually get going on it, you're going to want to make sure that you've selected everything on your paper here. And you're going to want to come over here to this little box. And you're going to want to select the 2.0 and the remove space after paragraph. By doing that, you're going to ensure that you have equal spacing everywhere throughout your paper. And make sure that you have 12-point font. If you look up here, you'll see that I have 12-point font here. I have it put in Times New Roman, but that's just because that's a preference of mine. Unless your teacher gives you a specific font type to use, just make sure your font is clear. Some people use Calibri, some use Times New Roman. Pretty much these two and this one are the ones I see the most, but whatever your teacher prefers per assignment. And then you can, like I said, go back over here and start your paper. Indent and start. So I'm going to hand you back to Tom now, and he'll take it from here.
All right. Thanks very much, Amanda. All right. Excellent. Good to see that. So I am going to continue in that same vein, showing you guys Microsoft Word. how to do the in-text citations and the Works Cited in Microsoft Word. And some of you may not be using Microsoft Word. You may have another program like Notes or another program like that. Most of those other word processing programs have very similar features, so you might need to do some Googling or some YouTubing to find out what it's called on your program or how to get these exact features on your program, but it'll be very similar to what we're showing you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I've got a couple things pulled up in Word here. So let's say I'm Jane's student and I'm working on this paper, right? So I've got my first 5-6 lines all really nice and neat. I've got my name and the phone, or name and the page number, not my phone number, up in the top, and then I'm going to start my paper. So here we go. I'm starting my paper, and here's what I've written so far. In his short story, Rappaccini's Daughter, Nathaniel Hawthorne relays the haunting story of a young university student named Giovanni and his fascination with the woman next door, Beatrice. Rappaccini, a medical doctor and professor of biology, has used the toxins of a plant to imbue his daughter with what he calls... And now, at this point, I want to quote something from the book. So I turn back over to the book, and on page 157, I've got the perfect quote. This is from the end of the story. Miserable, exclaimed Rappaccini. What mean you, foolish girl? Dost thou deem it misery to be endowed with marvelous gifts? This is what I want to quote right here. I don't need to quote this whole line, do I? Right? That's way too much. I've got something to say here. I'm writing my sentence, but I want to provide a little quick quote, provide a little of the flavor of the original, so to speak. So I'm going to put that into a quote here, and I'm copying. And so I've put that into quotation marks, right? And now at the end, I'm going to need to provide a citation. So this comes from a story written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I will write Hawthorne in parentheses. And we said this appeared on page 157. So just like that. Period. And that's how you would do an in-text citation in your paper. Now let's take a look down at the Works Cited page. So I've moved this down to page 2. Remember what I was saying earlier, you don't want to have a situation where, let's say this was the end of my paper. I've got a very short paper for some reason, just 2 sentences long and very laconic. So I've got my Works Cited right here, and then I start typing out my Works Cited. Not a good idea. We don't want it to appear on the same page as the essay that you're writing. So you'd want to put it on a new page. So you want what's called a page break. The way to create a page break in Microsoft Word and most word processing programs is very simple. You just hold Control, or for Apple it would be the little, you know, the little icon that looks like this. I don't know what to call that. And then hold Control and hit Enter, and it'll automatically pop it to the start of the next page. So what that means is, as I continue to write my essay, whoops, let me go back. As I continue to write my essay, but not in that spot, as I write a new paragraph and start writing my essay, la 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 la, and let's say I keep writing this essay, and it goes on to page 2 and 3 and 4, notice that my Works Cited page is always going to appear at the top of that next page because I used a page break. Oops. Just don't put text right there, put it right here. I add a little more text, but it's still appearing at the top of that next page because I'm using that page break. That's a really nice feature. Anyway. So, all right, here's where we left off. So, I've got it on a new page. So here's how I assemble my Works Cited. I've got to take a look at the sources that I'm using. So in this case, I was using a book called the Oxford Book of Gothic Tales. Try saying that 5 times fast. And in that book, I found this story, Rappaccini's Daughter, on pages 133 through 157. And this story was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. But This book was not edited and compiled by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This was written after he died, right? This was written, or it was edited and compiled by someone named Chris Baldick in the year 1992, right? So we've got to provide all of this information for our readers so that our readers know, for example, that we're reading the version of Rappaccini's Daughter that was published in the Oxford Book of Gothic Tales in 1992, and we're not reading maybe the original version that was published in, I don't know exactly when, 1842 or whenever. So we're going to provide all that information in the Works Cited, and if you remember from before, we're going to start with the last name, Hawthorne, and then comma, and then first name. Hawthorne, comma, Nathaniel. Then we're going to put the title of the short story, Rappaccini's Daughter. Then we're going to put the title of the book, the Oxford Book of Gothic Tales. Now, before I continue, I've got something that I need to address here, because I've got a short story title, and I've got a book title. Amanda, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Which of the two of these, if you're up for it, which of the two of these is the container? Is Rappaccini's Daughter the container, or is the Oxford Book of Gothic Tales the container?
The Oxford Book of Gothic Tales.
Yeah, awesome. Didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I appreciate that. So the Oxford Book of Gothic Tales is the container. Containers need to be put in italics. So I'm going to select that text, and I'm going to make it italics. And then bonus points, Amanda. Do you know what I should do for the title of the short story? Would I put that in italics?
No, I think you put that one in parentheses.
Not parentheses? I know what you're
No?
trying to say. You're thinking that's parentheses, but not parentheses, right?
Oh, no, quotation marks.
Yes, you got it.
That's the wrong thing.
I do that all the time. They're kind of the same shape, just one's tiny.
Yep.
And double. Very good. Okay, so the title of a short story goes into quotation marks. The title of a container or a book goes into italics. Let's say we're not doing a short story in an anthology, but instead we're doing a song on an album. Well, the song title would be put in quotation marks, and the album title would be put in italics because that album contains all the songs. Let's say we're doing a newspaper article in a newspaper. Well, the newspaper article title would go into quotation marks, and then the container title would be the newspaper title itself, like the Daily World, for example. Okay, so now we've got the title of the book. Next, we're going to provide any editor information that we might have. And at this point, I don't have this stuff memorized, and I don't expect students to either. You shouldn't, try to memorize how to do MLA formatting. What I recommend you do is you go to the Purdue OWL. So I'm going to open up some Google, and I'm going to do a search for Purdue OWL. Oh, look at that. It comes right up. And I'm going to look for MLA Works Cited. The Purdue OWL is a website from Purdue University in Indiana. It provides detailed information about how to do things like the MLA citations and APA citations, Chicago-style citations. So in all of your classes, as you need to do these citations for different assignments, the Purdue OWL is really your best friend. It's really not a question of memorizing how to cite works in different styles. You can memorize till the cows come home, and then they're going to release a new edition the next year, and then you'll have to relearn everything all over again. So what the name of the game is knowing where to find the information you need when you need it. And that's where just going to Google and typing in Purdue OWL, Purdue OWL MLA Works Cited. That's what you want to look for. Or maybe if you're working on the in-text citations, Purdue OWL in-text citations. And for MLA, and search for that. But so let's take a look, scrolling down, because what I'm working with now is let me pull this back up to remind you what we're working with. I've got the first part okay. I could rely on my memory for that, but I still need to figure out how do I put the editor, the publisher, and the year of publication. Where do those bits go? So we need to find in here. So we've got some information here. Let's see. For books, this was in a book. So I'm going to click on the books page here. And let's look for some examples. Aha, here we go. Basic book format. Last name, first name, title of book, city of publication, publisher, publication date. Okay. But it does not tell me about editors. So let's find for editors. Aha, an edition of a book. A work prepared by an editor. Success. So this is what we need. So I'm going to put this over here and then put this over here. So let's see. It's a nice advertisement right there. So here we have the author name, the container name, and notice after the container name we have a comma, and then the words edited by, and then that editor's name. Edited by, what was it, Chris Burdock? Chris Baldick. Edited by Chris Baldick. And then a comma, and then we'll have the publisher. And notice this looks like it says Oxford Up. What it's actually saying is Oxford University Press. So university presses are pretty common. It's common in a publisher's name to have those two words, University Press. So you can just abbreviate that, UP. Your reader will know what's going on there. And last, a comma, and then the year of publication, which in this case was 1992. All finished. Am I finished, Amanda? Or is there anything missing or needs to be addressed here?
Just 1 second. I gotta make it a little bigger. I can't see it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Something's going on with the formatting that needs to be addressed.
Oh gosh, you need a hanging indent.
There you go. Yep. First, as soon as you pulled it up, you knew exactly what was wrong. Yep. So how do I create a hanging indent? So sometimes students will just put their cursor here and they'll think, okay, I create an indent by hitting tab, right? And Amanda's grimacing because she's lived through this this torture of trying to figure out how to make this work in Microsoft Word. When you hit tab, it's going to send that whole darn thing all the way over. So what you need to do is, and I've got some stuff in the way, so let me move this. What you'll need to do here is select all of the text that you want to put in hanging indent form, and then go right up here to where we had selected the double point and the remove space after paragraph. But go to, nope, I'm lying. Don't go there. Amanda's laughing at me because we don't memorize this stuff. You just get facility with Microsoft Word and then you figure it out. Because again, there's going to be a new Microsoft Word every year and then it's going to be in a new place. You go to this little box right here, the paragraph settings box. It's very easy to miss, but it's this little pop-out box right here. So click on that. And over here, this is where we have indentation settings. So here we want a special indentation called a hanging indent. And usually it's going to default to 0.5 inches. That's correct. If it gives you something else here, like 1 or 0.3 or something like that, just change it to 0.5 and then hit OK. Ta-da! Now everything in that we selected, everything's going to appear with a hanging indent. So if I kept writing on this line, it would just carry over to the next line with the hanging indent. But if I started a new line, then it would start flush left, and it would continue on with that hanging indent. And again, the purpose is so we can just see the first line very clearly and read through quickly. All right, and that is, I think, all that we have to say about MLA formatting. Did we leave anything out, Amanda?
Don't think so.
I don't think so either. Well, I bet we did leave some stuff out. For example, we didn't tell you about block quotes or about about other. There's going to be so many different unique. We didn't tell you how to do like a journal entry or how to cite a picture or something like that. You're going to run into so many weird little citation things over the course of your college career, and so those are the things. All of this is stuff that the Writing Center is here to help you with. We can help you find the resources that you need so you can learn how to do those things that you need to do for your assignments. So thank you for participating and for watching this presentation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at tom.stearns@ghc.edu or check out the Writing Center. Drop in anytime that we're open, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then we have Sundays by appointment only. All right, thank you for watching. Hope you all have a great day.